takeoff. 1, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42.
This is exciting. It's my new podcast, a brand new venture for me. It's going to come out every month and we're going to talk to some of the real stars, the big names in the sport of sailing. And I guess my motivation has come from 15 years in television. You know, in television, time is really of the premium. And you may sit down and do a lovely, 40-minute interview with someone, and then 3 questions will be used in the broadcast. And, as a sailing enthusiast, I always felt I wanted to hear more, and I want you to hear more and really get to know, I suppose, the characters that we have in this fascinating sport. I'm currently at home. I'm in Cowes on the Isle of Wight, and I'm sitting on the green or the esplanade of Cowes. To my right-hand side is the Royal Yacht Squadron, where the America's Cup started all those years ago. And looking out towards the west, well, anyone who's raced here in a Cowes week or done a fast net will know what that looks like. Plenty of tide. It's one of the toughest places to sail on the planet, but a really special place for me. And I guess as I sit here, I'm really looking forward to the summer. It's going to be a good year here, and hopefully there'll be a bit more wind than there is today. Well, we thought we'd kick off the podcast with a sailor who's been making fast boats go fast for a very long time. Australia's Nathan Outteridge has quite the CV. Moth world champion, Olympic gold and silver in the 49er. Skipper, of course, of Artemis Racing in the last America's Cup. He's now leading the Japanese team into the brand new SailGP. And we recorded this podcast on the eve of the very first event held in Sydney Harbour. You'll hear he seems pretty relaxed about the whole thing, and I can tell you no other skipper was quite this chilled about what they were going to take on. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I really hope you enjoy listening to the hour I spent with Nathan Outteridge.
Half the fun of sailing these boats is you are on the edge. This foiling technology is starting to change the sport. You're doing around 30 knots and you bear away and you hit low 40s.
Well, Nathan, it's great to catch up. Thanks very much for agreeing to do this. I feel like I've been asking you questions for the best part of a decade.
Yeah, it feels like it's been probably longer than a decade. I think, probably I remember being in Weymouth in 2012 and you doing all the interviews and coming to all the parties after it. So no, it's nice to sit down in a more casual atmosphere.
It is. It's really nice. But of course, we're here in Sydney. We're just a few days out from SailGP, the much anticipated SailGP. How is it coming together, and how are you feeling to be part of it?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to be a part of it. To be honest, I was a bit disappointed when the Cup finished in Bermuda and thinking that the boats were never going to get used or sailed again. And I know these boats aren't exactly the same, but the speeds and the skills required to sail these kind of boats are amazing. And when I heard rumours that Larry and Russell were thinking of putting on this event, which is now SailGP, I was very excited to hear it, and now I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Talk to me a bit about the boats. I mean, the chat here in Sydney is that it's all moved up a whole new level. What are they like, and how hard are they?
They've improved some parts of the boat, and then other parts of the boat, still need a bit of work. There's a lot of work that's happened in the space of about a year to get 6 boats that are identical, ready to go. And some of the fundamental design is really good. The foils are really nice. They're really good at high-end speeds. But unfortunately, when you try to make a boat go faster, it does make it harder to sail, and it suffers in the lighter wind performance. So the high-speed dagger boards in these boats are capable of doing 50 knots. They handle cavitation much better. And the rudders are much thinner, which means they're more flexible, so the steering is a little bit more difficult. We spent so much time on a daily basis developing a boat in Bermuda that you felt right at home in the boat. Whereas now it's trying to learn how to do it all again and feel the comfort zone.
if you're feeling slightly behind the curve, what about all the other guys who haven't steered these kind of boats? I mean, how must they be feeling on the eve of all this?
I guess they don't know anything different, you know? They've never had to drive a boat like this before, had the chance. So for them, this is new, and this is what an F50 is like. Whereas some of the creature comforts I had in the Artemis boat have been left behind. Some of my little personal things. So now I'm having to learn to sort of conform to what everyone else has got. And you know, I've had a good chat to a lot of the guys who are sailing the other boats, and sort of sail with some of them during the sea trials. And I'm trying to help them as much as I can, because I think, you know, for the event to be successful, we need good, close, competitive racing. And you know, any bit of advice that, you know, comes across is very much appreciated.
We had a bit of a rehearsal for the broadcast, you know, and I was watching everyone zooming up and down Sydney Harbour. And I was just thinking, you know, how far the sport has come. I wonder, you know, when you look back to those early days when you went moth sailing, the first time that the boat rised up out of the water, you know, could you imagine that you would be doing those kind of speeds in this kind of place?
No, well, I think the first time I ever sailed a moth would have been just before the Beijing Olympics. So that's 11 years ago now that the foiling moth really started to take off. And that first time you jump out of the water and the boat goes quiet and it accelerates so much that you can't trim the main on quick enough and you crash, to now where it's just second nature. And when you're sailing and you are going upwind and you're doing around 30 knots and you bear away and you hit low 40s, you know, it feels second nature. And in Bermuda we did so much of that, you kind of got a bit numb to those senses. But you bring a boat like that to Sydney, where I've done a lot of sailing and it's small, and done lots of 49er training here, and thinking, you know, the distance between Shark Island and Bradley's is you know, X number of minutes. And now I'm thinking it's about 25 seconds. It really sort of brings it into perspective how fast these boats are, and how good we're going to have to be, you know, to get around the racetrack on the weekend.
I think, you know, I'm not the only one who would say this, but I feel that you've been a real sort of key influencer in the progression of the sport in the foiling arena. I mean, you are one of the first of the foiling generation. I mean, how do you see perhaps your role right at the pointy end of the sport?
Well, to be honest, I just feel really lucky that, you know, I was at the right age when this technology came out. You know, I would have been like 22 when the Moth started to becoming quite popular. So from a very, not young age, but from a really good point in my sailing career, I was actually accessing all this technology. And so sailing the Moth for, you know, 4 or 5 years, and then the America's Cup went to the foiling catamarans, just made you know, it very easy for me to get involved in the very top of our sport. So you know, I'm very thankful that the technology has come at a time when it has, and I've, you know, really enjoyed pushing the development and working with a lot of really smart designers, and just trying to keep pushing the sport forward. And I know that, you know, sailing is really widely spread in different areas, but I think this foiling technology and this high performance, really fast boats is starting to change the sport. You know, there's lots of kids now who are getting into wasp really early, that, you know, foil, and they'll move into moths, and even the Olympics is starting to get foiling equipment in there. I think it's just another dynamic to the sport, and it's a really exciting time to be involved in the sport.
I was chatting to Taylor Canfield the other day, and he used the term extreme sport, and I suppose I'd never really thought of sailing as an extreme sport.
It is now.
Because we do it. You know, how extreme is it? You know, does it feel like that?
It's really extreme. Like, we were just having a sailing team meeting this afternoon, looking at all the footage from the previous America's Cup, and then that rolls into looking at footage of sailing Nacra 17s or sailing Moths. And half the fun of sailing these boats and the enjoyment we get is, you know, you are on the edge. You know, it's really easy to crash the boat. It's really easy to have a wipeout, and so the adrenaline you get from sailing these boats makes it really feel like an extreme sport.
Okay, let's talk form. We're just a few days away from it all kicking off, and everyone's got you tipped as the favourite, Nathan. I mean, are you planning how you're going to spend the $1 million?
I think we're far from planning how to spend any money at this point. But we are aware that our team has a lot of experience, and every single one on our boat was involved in the last America's Cup. We had Ian and Luke and myself as part of Artemis Racing and kind of the core group when it came to performance and manoeuvring on that boat. And we've got Yuki and Yugo from SoftBank Team Japan who were grinders in that team, but they obviously understand all the dynamics of the boat. So with very few days training, I think we counted up the number of days training. We might have got 3 or 4 days training so far as a team. But we have a very good idea of the playbook, how to manoeuvre. If the manoeuvre goes badly, how to recover from it. We're not scared of going fast because we've done a lot of that before. So, I think when it comes to handling the boat and racing the boat, we're quite confident. But we know that the other sailors are very good sailors, and maybe we have a small advantage right now, sitting on the couch here. But come the final event, which is the event that actually matters at the end of the day for the prize money, everyone's going to be a lot better. And they're going to learn from us. And the way that the whole event works is there's so much data. You can sit there and look at the data of every team. So, even now we've done a few days sailing, we're already analysing the other teams. And, the 2 or 3 days we've had sailing, we can tell that the Australian team with Tom Slingsby are tacking better than we are, and we're jibing better than they are. So we're already trying to analyse how to get better. So it's going to be a really good season ahead.
I mean, I find it weird. I suppose when we're used to the cup world, that you can share data. I've been wandering in and out of everyone's bases. It's so different, isn't it? I mean, imagine for you it must be extraordinary to know what everyone else is up to.
It's fascinating. We come from this world of secrecy where you can't talk to your friends after sailing because you might slip and accidentally say something that you shouldn't. You have no idea their setup on their wing or what their boat feels like. But in this event, I've driven the British boat, the Aussie boat, the American boat involved in sea trolling those, and now the Japanese boat. So there's only 2 boats in the fleet I haven't sailed, and one of them's the Chinese boat, which once was the Artemis boat. So I've driven 5 out of the 6 boats. So you know how they all feel, and you know that their wing sheet is the exact same length as yours. You know the twist they can achieve is the same as yours in the wing. The foil control system's all the same. And at the end of the day's racing, you can pull up all the data and work out who pushes what button when, how much rudder differential they're having. Like anything you want to know about a boat, you can access it. So that's why, even though I feel like maybe we have an advantage right now, they're going to learn very quickly, and by the time we get to Marseille at the final, it's going to be tight.
All right, I've got a bit ahead of myself, getting a bit excited by SailGP. Massive changes in the Outteridge household lately. Just become a daddy. Talk to me about that and how that's all felt.
Yeah, we had a little boy, Jack Henry, on the 4th of January, and everyone tells you it changes your life and your world, and it definitely does. It's been really good so far. Unfortunately, I had to leave and come over here and get ready for this event, but I spent a good 3 weeks there initially, and my wife Emma and Jack are coming over in a couple of days and we'll be here. So I've been making the most of getting some sleep while I can, and it's really it's a life-changing moment. You go through different phases in your life, and I can now understand why my parents are always so excited when they see me again now, because it's just that special connection that you never really can understand until you're there.
I know family is important to you. I mean, you're like the Waltons of of the sailing world in Australia. We see your brother everywhere.
You can't miss him, can you?
He's, everyone loves Bo, and he's always filming whatever's going on. He's adorable. And now, of course, we see a lot more of your sister. How important is that sort of tight family unit?
Yeah, we do have a really close family, and some people wonder how we still manage to get on so well when we spend so much time together. But I guess growing up as kids, we all sailed, and we loved sailing, and obviously being the eldest, I sort of led the way. Bo's quite a good sailor, but he found his niche now in videoing and photography with sailing, and he's slowly learning how to do a bit of journalist and writing stuff as well. And he has so much enthusiasm and passion for the sport, and I think you know, it works really well where I can go out and do the sailing and he can tell the story. And my sister, you know, she again loves sailing, and you know, being 5 years younger, sort of looked up to her brothers always sailing, and you know, she's sailed the FX trying to campaign for the Rio Olympics, and you know, was there or thereabouts, but Australia never ended up sending anyone, so we sort of she missed her opportunity, and now we're sailing the Nacra together, which has been a lot of fun, and we've sort of fit a bit of training in here and there. I don't have a whole lot of free time, but she said to me, she said, look, I really want to go to the Olympics, and if I'm going to do it, I want to do really well. And she's like, I don't want to be sailing for like what'd she say, like a lifestyle. She's like, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it properly. And so I said, well, look, you know, I only have a certain amount of time available. Let's do a bit of sailing like we did last year and see how we go at the Worlds. And if we go well at the Worlds, we'll make an assessment and go from there. And we ended up coming second at the Worlds. So we're now trying to juggle all the commitments that I have to make it work.
We've been making some features here for the television, and we've got some lovely pictures. Actually, Bo got us these lovely pictures of you all growing up. And this is a Saba, I suppose. It's a little Saba or
yeah,
an
a
optimist?
Saba. Yeah, it's like an optimist.
Yeah, and you have Bo in the boat, and he's grinning away like mad. I mean, I wonder if you can even remember when sailing, you know, was like that, sort of, you know, normal kind of sailing.
Yeah, I remember really well. One of the best reasons to have Bo as a crew, you know, we would have been sailing Sabo, so I think you sailed 2 up until you turned 12. So I must have been 10 or 11, so he would have been like 8 or something like that. And the biggest skill that Bo had when we were racing was that when we would go downwind, and back in the day when you did the triangle windward return courses, you'd get right behind the boat ahead and he'd start talking to them. And he'd have a chat to them and he'd distract them, and I'd start plotting a way to get past them. And the next minute we'd get on the wind shuttle of the boat ahead, we'd sail past them, and then Bo would just turn around and wave and say, see you guys. And that was his way of enjoying sailing. He was very social, and I can see why he does the job he does now. Whereas I was always trying to think about ways to get ahead of the boats and race. And I think Bo probably just enjoyed the fact that he was out sailing having fun.
It can be a lonely game, sailing, particularly when things aren't necessarily going the way you want them. You know, how comforting is it to have Bo around, and to, you know, or Haley, and you know, to have your team, I suppose, right there with you?
Yeah, you're right. Like, it can be a pretty lonely game, especially if you're, you know, from this part of the world. You have to spend a lot of time overseas and in Europe competing, and you know, it's hard to justify flying to Europe for 2 weeks and then flying back. So I think the thing that I've, you know, focused on a bit and enjoyed a lot is, you know, having family there is great, and having Bo and Haley at events when, you know, I was sailing the 49, as was Haley, and Bo was there. We wouldn't always stay together as a family, but we would often catch up at the events or in between events. But also having, you know, good teammates, you know, people that you sail with, good coaches, and good training partners from around the world. And it's funny, now when I'm back home, or now I'm actually living in New Zealand, when you're home in your home environment, I find that I have less people there that I know than I do when I'm at these events. So whether it's a SailGP event, an Olympic classes event, or when we're living in Bermuda for the America's Cup, that's your family and that's your network. And even though you might be trying to beat them on the water, you're still really good friends, and catch up with them at night and invite them all to your wedding and all that sort of stuff. And that's something that I had no idea sailing was ever going to bring. I thought it was, you know, high focus competition, but you know, when you make it your life, it's really enjoyable.
I've got to pick you up on the fact that you're living in New Zealand. Something you want to share with us? Obviously, we've got an America's Cup happening there in not too distant future. What can you tell us?
Funnily enough, it has absolutely nothing to do with the America's Cup. My wife Emma, she's a Kiwi, and she grew up, you know, in New Zealand most of her life. Her dad was heavily involved with Team New Zealand, the America's Cup, and so she would often travel to each of the different America's Cups. I think she's been to every one since 1988. And when the America's Cup ended in Bermuda, and Artemis racing was no longer going to go ahead, we were faced with the decision of deciding where we actually got to live. And we met in San Francisco at the America's Cup there. And ever since then, we've just lived where we had to live for the America's Cup. So we spent some time in San Francisco and then in Bermuda. And we knew we were going to start a family. And we thought a lot about it, where it was best to be. And we thought, if we go to New Zealand, then Em will be with her parents and with her family and with her friends, and a lot of her friends are now having babies of their own. And so that support network, I think, is going to be very important. I think had we been, based in Australia, I'd still be travelling all the time. And I know that Em and Jack will try and travel as much as they can, but I just think that place for us is the best place to be. And it's quite convenient that the America's Cup's coming up. So if I don't get a job offer anytime soon, I'll be probably watching from North Head like everyone else.
Have you had any job offers?
No, I haven't. I've had lots of different chats over the last year, and every time a conversation begins, it seems to dry up quite quickly. And it's interesting. I think because I committed to Artemis Racing to do the next Cup, in that time window from the Cup ending and Artemis, Torbjorn deciding he no longer wants to do it, all the driving jobs and all the key roles in all the current teams, were full. They were full. So, there's only 4 teams, and now there's a couple more teams coming on now. But, we'll see what happens. You never know what's around the corner, and I'm always open to
Too expensive, Nathan.
to anything that happens. I'll go sailing for free. I just love it. Doesn't matter.
They look cool though, the boats. I mean, I bet you're dying to have a go.
I'd love to have a go. They look to me like a big Moth. Obviously they've got the things that swing out the side and all of that, but I've seen some video and I've spoken to some people who sail the boats, and they basically say unless you're going at full speed and the thing's ripping, it's going to capsize, and it sounds much like a Moth, and that's what I learnt to sail on. It's going to be very difficult to sail and going to require a lot of skill. And, I'd love to be involved if the opportunity came.
My skills were all in them really slow boats. I mean, I look back to the Yingling now, must have done about 5 knots at best. And I just wonder, you grew up sailing, just, like all of us, small dinghies. When was that sort of breakthrough moment where you thought, actually, I can sail fast, I get it?
Yeah, well, like everyone, I grew up sailing the small boats, and here in Australia, like in the late 80s and early 90s, was the era of the 18-foot skiffs, and it featured on TV here. And so, as a kid, I'd grow up watching, the 18-footers on TV.
Around the world, we all watched that.
Guys like Rob Brown, Michael Walsh, and then Chris Nicholson got involved and started dominating, and I just said to Dad, when I get old enough, that's what I'm going to do. I wasn't interested in the Olympics, because I didn't even know half the boats. And then the 49er came around, and that was in the Olympics. And so the Olympics were here in, 2000, so I would have been 14. So I came down and watched the racing every day. But I only wanted to watch the 49ers because that was the fast boat. And at this point, I still hadn't even sailed a boat that went probably more than 10 knots. But I just thought, they look fast, they're colourful, they crash, they capsize. That's something I could be interested in. And then as I got older, I eventually got into the 49er. I came through the 29er, which was around, again, I turned 14, 15, and that's when the 29er came out. So I was just at the right age for these high-performance boats, to race. And I did my apprenticeship in the 470 under the Victor program, and that taught me a lot about how to campaign for an Olympics. And then I got, my hands on a 49er and went from there. And never, at that point, no one knew that foiling was going to be a potential. And I remember after the Olympics in Beijing, I got offered to go sailing on a Moth a few times, and I was like, wow, this is way better than the 49er. You can go on your own, you can learn all this stuff. And, so then I sailed the Moth and the 49er for several years. And I'm sure that the Moth sailing helped my 49er a lot, because in a boat that goes fast, you have to think very quickly. And if you don't think fast enough, you end up either missing a ley line or doing a bad manoeuvre. So the thought processes that were coming from Moth sailing meant that I was ahead of the game in the 49er. And then I talked Pete Burling into getting a Moth when he started sailing the 49er.
Yeah, big mistake.
Yeah, tell me about that. And so we had a great time, sailing Moths and 49ers together. And, I think, some of the best sailors, at least in these high performance boats, they do have to come through those smaller boats because you can make mistakes in Moths. It doesn't matter. You can't make mistakes on these boats. It's too expensive.
I mean, you dominated the 49er for a period, didn't you? Was it 6 World Championships?
Yeah, 4 World Championships and a second and a third over a 6-year period, yeah.
I mean, that is dominating.
Yeah, well, all I remember is after Beijing and missing the medal, I just had my heart set on getting the gold medal in London, and that meant, showing up to major events, being prepared and ready to race, and for 4 years we did everything we could to dominate, and looking back, we definitely did.
We can't talk 49ers without talking about your long-term partner, Ian Jensen, Goobs.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with him. I saw you posted something on Instagram from here, from Sydney, from the SailGP. There you are with your wingman, right, sailing together, making decisions together. How good does it feel? How natural? I mean, what is it about your relationship that just makes it work?
Yeah, well, I've known Goobs for a very long time. Probably met him the first day he decided to come sailing at about 5 or 6, and we raced against each other as kids, and then we raced together, and I think we won a Flying 11 Nationals in 2000, and then I'm about 2 or 3 years older than him, so we did a bit of split sailing. I started doing some youth worlds, and he was still like middle of high school. But the final year I went to the youth worlds, the crew I was sailing with at the time, he aged out. So I asked Goobs if he wanted to come back and sail with me. And we went off to Poland and won the youth worlds there. And then that was around the time I wanted to get into the 49er. And I asked him if he wanted to do it, but he was 16. He had a couple more years of school to go. It meant traveling all around. And so we basically sat out that cycle, and I was sailing with Ben Austin at the time, and we had a great campaign. But the moment Beijing was over, I had a really long chat to our coach Emmett, and I said, I think I'd like to sail with Goobs again. We had a lot of success as kids, and Goobs had been sailing the 49er with another guy, and Emmett said to me, "Really, like that guy?" He's like, "That guy, he loses his clothes, he's always late to training." And I'm like, "Yep, but he has this special talent that no one's got that I've ever sailed with. The feel that he has for a boat to make it go fast and to know what to do. And often he can't explain exactly why he does things, but it's just always right. And he has this knack to usually he doesn't say much, because he just goes with the flow, and he knows that, as a team, I'll look at situations and make decisions about what we need to do, but every now and then he'll speak up, and when he speaks up, you have to listen. I hadn't sailed with Goobs since Bermuda till we got here. I think there might have been, I did Superfoiler series with him last year in Glen Ashby, which was great. But since then, it's been about a year since we've actually stepped foot in a boat together. And we go out sailing the other day and straight into foiling jibes on the first couple. And we're like, oh, it's like old times. And, that's really special to have something like that.
I mean, I'll never forget in London 2012, we were there, we're working for the BBC, we're on the water, but also working for Channel 7. So we'd interviewed you quite a lot. And I remember one day, it was 2 races, in between races, you came alongside and spoke to us. And I've worked in television in quite a lot of Olympic Games. No one is that relaxed. No one does that. And I just thought, actually, here's someone just really relaxed and really confident. Can you remember back how prepared and how ready you were to win that gold?
Yep, I can. It's probably some of the best years I've had sailing, and we were very relaxed because we were very prepared. We knew what was required to win those Olympics, and I remember going to Weymouth in 2009, so years ahead. One event on the racetrack, and we're sailing, and Emmett said to us, "Boys, you got to slow down. Like you're showing everyone too much right now." And the moment he said that, it kind of triggered. It's like, we're ready. And I remember talking to a coach, Mike Fletcher. You probably know Mike Fletcher. He's an Aussie coaching legend. And he would always bang on about, in Beijing before the Olympics, if the Olympics starts tomorrow, are you ready? What equipment are you going to use? Are you at the right weight? Is your fitness okay? And he said, if you can answer that question and say yes, you are 100% ready to go. And in sailing, you're never going to be perfect, but you can be good enough to win the gold medal or better than other people. And for 3 years we were ready for those Olympics. We knew what was required, and the Olympics itself wasn't nervous, it was just enjoyable. Every race, we raced to the level that we wanted to race at. We saw our competitors making mistakes that they wouldn't usually make, and it just got easier every day. And so the day you came over and wanted to have a chat, I was like, sure, we'll put the wing on and have a chat. And, we just look back at that as just the most fun event we've ever done.
It's interesting, about what it takes to win a gold medal. I mean, Ben Ainsley, he's always asked, isn't he, why are you so much better than everyone else? How come you've got more medals than anyone ever won? And he always just says, I worked harder. Actually, I practiced harder. And I remember that time before Weymouth, every time we went to Weymouth filming, you and Goobs were out. And even if there was a regatta on, everyone would come in, they'd pack up, they'd get on their bikes or whatever. You would have lunch and you go back out again. I mean,
there's always stuff to do.
There's always stuff to do, and nobody worked harder in the 49er in that venue than the pair of you.
Yeah, and I remember that. There was a Salford Cold Regatta, which was in June, a couple of months before the Olympics, and we won that event, but we weren't 100% happy with a few little things. And so, as you do, you come in, you go to the prize giving, you spray the champagne, and our training partners were there, and as we finished the champagne, we went back to the boat, we hoisted the sails with them, and we went back out. And that was because there's only so much time that you can spend in the Olympic venue. We had to get home, I had other events to go to, and we just knew that, okay, yeah, we won by 10 points, whatever it was, but that's not enough. We need to go out and find the next little bit. And that's what wins gold medals. You don't just say, we won that event, let's go and get on the piss. And that's, you go back on your work again.
Oh, I remember seeing exactly that happen. I mean, I was a bit like that with my campaigns. Quite often we would launch in the dark, and you look back, you think, God, that was all a bit mad. But actually, it just felt that there was always a massive long list of things to improve on. Absolutely,
and for us, the best thing that we had in our team, and we've now got again here in SailGP, is Emmett Lazic. He coached me at all 3 Olympics, and coached Goobs and I to 3 world titles together, and he's so methodical about what's required to be done, and you'll sit in a debrief and you'll discuss things, and he's just constantly typing on his computer, this job list, that job list, and then the priorities, and you'd sit at the end and he's like, all right boys, so based on that last hour, tomorrow when we go out we're going to do X, Y and Z, and that means that if we tick those off we can go on to the next stage, and he just did that the whole time. And so instead of finishing a training session or event, going home and trying to think about what we need to do, he's just got it covered. Honestly, like for Rio Olympics, without him, we wouldn't have probably made the medal race. Goobs and I were busy off with our America's Cup campaign. Emmett was here in Australia, packing containers, putting our boat together, measuring all our equipment, getting our training partners to go sailing and test it for us so that we could show up to an event 2 days before and race and get on the podium. And you find these people in your life that you rely on, and they're just like family to you.
Talking of podiums, I mean, what is that like in London to stand on that top step with someone you've known since he was 5 years old? What did that feel to do that together? I mean, particularly after Beijing, and I know you were disappointed. You felt you could have done better there.
Yeah, it's it's hard to describe, and only I think those people who've ever stood on that top step know what it feels like. And I remember chatting to Goobs, and of course we're really good mates with Tom Slingsby, and he won a gold medal there too, and Malcolm Page I'm really close with as well, and for the 3 of us all to win gold medals was just amazing. But for Goobs and I, the amount of time and effort we put into it, and the feeling I had at the end was obviously a lot of satisfaction that, it had all come off, but I was also very relieved because I know how easy it is for it to not go well. And so, we were 100% prepared. All our friends and family came over. Everyone assumed we were going to win before it even began. So when we finally won, it was quite relieving. And, weeks after it was when it probably got really enjoyable, and you reflect on it now, and you just remember it for a long time.
That Aussie sailing team was phenomenal. To beat the British on home waters. I always remember the pub.
Yeah.
Just down from the sailing club. That just became a little Australia, didn't it? All the TV cameras from all the stations in Australia came, and it was quite something. Why do you think there was, the team was so successful that year, and what did that feel like from the inside?
Well, I think there was a big change in how the Australian sailing team operated from the Athens Olympics. Sydney, there was a lot of medals for Australia and the home Olympics, and then Athens came away with none, and that's 2004. So I was in the youth program at that stage, and I remember entering the team in 2006, and you could feel this culture that was non-existent starting to develop. And what happened was they got all the good sailors in Australia, and they got them to all come together regularly and talk to each other and share experiences. And Australia is a small country when it comes to the number of people, but are really widely spread. And we've got people in Perth, Brisbane, Tasmania, Melbourne, all spread out around the country. And so they would just bring us together a bit more often than they would, say, previously. And when you do that and you bring, really like-minded people who are very good at sailing, and you mix them with the coaching staff, I learn a lot from Malcolm Page. He has a bit to do with why I won a medal. I learn a lot from Glenn Ashby, Darren Bundock, Michael Blackburn. All these guys who are in the program, one way or another, we're all helping each other. Tommy and I would constantly be talking about, what happened out on course C, in Weymouth. And he'd say, on course D there was a bit more current, and it's just your dinner conversation. So you sort of live and breathe it. And then when that happens, it just sort of flows from that group, and it just sort of filters down to everyone else in the team. And it was great to be involved in, and obviously funding helps a lot. But we just spent money in the right areas, and you don't need to have a lot of money to win medals at the Olympics. You just need to be smart with how you spend it and efficient. And I think that worked really well. And now the challenge is trying to keep passing that through the generations as younger sailors come into the team.
Do you think it's still the pinnacle of sailing, a gold medal?
It's a really tough question, what's the pinnacle in sailing? The gold medal for me is probably like an individual achievement. The best sailors are the ones who win Olympic medals. The best teams are the ones that win the America's Cup. The America's Cup doesn't have to have the best helmsman. If his boat goes 3 knots faster than someone else, he's going to win. So it's a combination of designers and sailors in the Cup, whereas the Olympics is, the equipment is more or less one design. Most of the classes are one design, or, you take a 470 or a fin. There's some design elements involved, but the sailor does a lot of the design. So, I think if you win a gold medal, you're by far, one of the greatest sailors that's ever been. And personal satisfaction, there's nothing better than that.
There's a lot happening, isn't there, in the Olympic sailing world, which this is a really tough question.
I've not really followed it that closely, but yes, there is a lot happening, I understand.
I mean, what do you think of, where they're taking the sport?
I sometimes don't understand the logic behind those kind of decisions. I think, my opinion of sailing is that the dinghy sailing is, for the Olympics, and it's more the amateur sailing. It's not professional sailing. None of us are getting paid lots of money to do Olympic sailing. There's lots of other sailing in the world if you want to do that. And what's really difficult is if you're a young kid, coming through the youth classes, wanting to get into the Olympics, there's like a bit of a pathway, and what seems like it's happened all of a sudden is that the pathway's just been shattered. And so there's these young guys who are, either getting into the fin or, you know, trying to get into 470s or whatever classes that are about to get turned on their head, and now sort of standing there going, well where do I go? And, you know, if I had my 2 cents about how the Olympics should work, I think you need to have the traditional kind of boats in the Olympics, you know, the slow monohull displacement boats that are all about tactical sailing, you know, like your laser, your radial, your fin, your 470 sort of style boats. Then I think you need to have your high performance kind of boats, you know, the 49ers and the Nacras and things like that. And then I think there's an area in the sport which is not your traditional course racing. You know, it could be a slalom style racing, it could be a downwind or reaching start, it could be some kind of round robin, and that's where I see these extreme sailing craft like the Moth, like the foiling kites, like the windsurfers, where they're designed to go fast. So don't send them out in 6 knots and tell them to go upwind and downwind and pump to try and make the board go 6 knots instead of 4. Put them off on a reach, get the thing planing, go around Mark 1, bear away, go downwind, do a bit of a slalom, come back up, make the race go for 10 minutes, eliminate some people, and if that's the medal, then that's great. They don't all have to be the same, and that's the problem. They're trying to fit all these different craft into one box, and I think if you did that, then you could say there's the traditional sailing medals, the high performance sailing medals, and then the extreme sailing medals. And I think that would go a long way in sailing, and kids could choose which avenue they want to take. I showed up and I'm like, cool, so we got some boat, let's go sailing. I should have asked if they planned on foiling because that boat didn't foil. And everyone remembers the obvious mistake of me falling off the boat.
What about like the Mochas or, you know, the Jules Verne? I mean, you're a man who knows how to make a boat go fast. When you look at the modern iteration of those kind of boats, aren't you tempted by that?
I'd love to sail it for a few hours, but there's no way I'm going overnight. I for whatever reason, I've never ever been tempted to do an overnight race. I don't know, the idea of going offshore for days on end and going sailing, just, it doesn't tempt me. I'd love to be dropped on by a helicopter in the Southern Ocean and spend 4 hours sending the boat and then get picked up and go home and go to sleep and have a good night's sleep and go back and do it again. I'm more of a day sailor. I like fast extreme boats, and I'd love the opportunity to get involved in any of those boats, but unless I'm prepared to go overnight, I don't see it happening.
I'm surprised at that. Even Pete Burling went offshore, did a Volvo.
Yeah, I know, he's nuts.
And Nathan, your big project of late, of course, has been the America's Cup, a fixture for 2 cups with Artemis Racing, the big Swedish team. I mean, can you remember how that all came about? You know, one day you're sailing your 49er, the next you were in San Francisco.
Yeah, no, it was a step up to the big leagues, that's for sure. I got a little opportunity to be involved in the America's Cup World Series with Team Korea, and I'm not sure if you remember, but it was the beginning of 2012, and Emmett Goobs and I discussed, you know, the final 6 months into the Olympics, what was required to win in London, and you know, I got a call from a mate, Troy Tyndall, and had a chat to Ian Murray at the time, who I was asking for a bit of advice, and said, look, they want me to come and drive the boat. Chris Draper was driving the boat at the time. He got hired by Luna Rossa, so there was a position available. And I think there was 3 or 4 events before the Olympics that were going to take up, you know, a week or 2 of my time per event. And so it wasn't really ideal, you know, in terms of Olympic preparation, but I know that if you say no to an opportunity once, it'll never come around again. So I took the risk and took it on, and you know, showed up and did those events, and we did okay, we did quite well. But something happened, I think, in the lead up to the Olympics where I guess there were teams all of a sudden starting to look for an opportunity, you know, to find reserve sailors, and I was approached by Paul Kayard from Artemis, Grant Dalton from Team New Zealand and Max Serena, all in the space of about 24 hours of each other at the America's Cup World Series event, which was straight after the Olympics. And I was sort of like, on a day rate, kind of getting paid hardly anything to sail with Team Korea, but knowing it was a great opportunity. And then all of a sudden I had the three, big teams besides Oracle asking if I wanted to be involved. And, I was sort of still on a high from the Olympics, just going, well, this is great. And I'm like, oh, cool, I get take my pick of whichever team, not really knowing what was in store and knowing, whichever team you pick, might determine your future for 5 years or even longer. So
they own you. I mean, how exciting was that? You pick up the phone and it's Grant Dalton.
Yeah, and I'm just like, yeah, sure, yeah, I can have a chat with you in San Francisco, and yeah, that's cool. And at that point, I knew obviously that the 72s were going to be amazing, cool boats, and it was around that time I think Team New Zealand had just launched their boat, and it was foiling, and I was like, oh, this is right up my alley, like just a great chance to learn, and I hope that I could be involved in somehow. And so I spoke to all three of them, and Luna Rossa, I think, were stacked with helmsmen. And Grant Dalton said to me, he said, look, Dean's going to drive the boat regardless. So if you come, it's a reserve driving position, but, we'd love to have you, and it'd be a great opportunity. And I thought, well, Team New Zealand, it's like one of the best teams that's ever been involved in the America's Cup and sport. I thought that's an awesome opportunity. And then I spoke to Paul Kayard, and he said a similar thing, but he said, look, the driving position on that boat's not 100% confirmed. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. So anyway, long story short, I ended up deciding to join Artemis. And I remember the first day I showed up at the shed and walked in there and saw the boat and realised I should have asked if they planned on foiling because that boat didn't foil. And I was like, oh no. So that was a lesson there, to learn to ask as many questions as you can before you make your decision. But anyway, it's been an amazing decision, and
it's such a leap,
really,
isn't it?
It's a huge leap.
You and Goobs and your coach going around the world, Olympic sailing, to, I mean, the
100 people on your first day.
Yeah, the responsibility of that, and having to deliver for a billionaire and a great big state-of-the-art
Well, I don't
boat.
think I quite even understood what was involved for months. I showed up and I'm like, cool, so we got some boat, let's go sailing. And the boat wasn't ready yet. And so I spent, I think it was 38 days not sailing. And I'm like, so I've just joined an America's Cup team, which is about as good as it can get in sailing. And I'm getting paid well all of a sudden, which I thought was to go sailing. And I didn't sail for over a month. And I don't think I went that long without sailing since I was at school. So, and even then I probably sailed every weekend. So it was a big change, but it was a huge learning exercise. And those first, 6 months, and I was probably only with the team for 9 months before the Cup began, but the amount of things that I learned in a short space of time is unbelievable. And then, thinking what I know now compared to what I know then, it's incredible.
It's fascinating, I think, after the Cup. I mean, particularly, slightly on the outside, you're not really knowing what's going on with everybody. We often think that after all that hard work, for years and years and years, what would it be like in the final team debrief? I mean, do you know, what could have been done differently in the last Cup now? What could have played it differently?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm sure there's a few of us in our team that wake up middle of the night just saying if only we had done this or that. And I still talk to Perce quite a bit, and if we know what we knew now back then, we could have made a few fundamental changes. But to be honest, with Artemis Racing and the few things that we kind of missed that we could have done a bit better, it kind of stems down to a couple of things that happened probably a few years before the Cup began. And one of them was to do with the flight control system and the stability of the dagger boards, and to try and explain it in a bit more detail, basically the the dagger boards, you know, the horizontal, the angle at which that points, whether it's angled down, makes it unstable and fast, angled up, makes it easier to sail but a bit slower. And that is very hand in hand with the flight control system, you know, the twist grips that we now have on the wheels. And at a crucial point when we decided to lock in the dagger boards that we were going to build for the America's Cup, our flight control system wasn't very good. So we opted for a foil that we knew would have a very good section shape and be very fast, but it was just a bit more stable than what, say, Team New Zealand came out with in the end. And we didn't invest enough time in developing our flight control system until it was too late. And it probably would have been after we launched the AC50 and we started sailing that Jonathan, who was one of our systems engineers, introduced us to this guy, Paul, who came from Boeing, who said, I can fix all your flight control problems. And he did it in the space of a month. And all of a sudden our boat became very easy to sail and amazing for me, but now we were carrying this drag penalty of stability in our foils. And so there's just these light bulb moments that happen, you know, in teams and campaigns. And, you know, the day we saw Team New Zealand launch their boat with their dagger boards, and Perce came to me and said, oh, mate, we got a bit on, you know, like that foil shape is going to be this many meters around the course faster than us if they can control it. And they had the flight control system to control it, so.
It was an exciting Challenger final, though. I mean, I guess
Unbelievable,
against Pete Burling, your old adversary. I mean, it was really dramatic.
Yeah, it was, and we knew that, you know, I was saying that, you know, we're a bit off the pace there, and we could have done things earlier, but it didn't mean that there wasn't going to be a fight. And I think we proved that, you know, I think we led around the first mark in all but the last race. So we came out starting as best we could. We knew our boat would perform quickly on the reach and downwind, and then we just fought like hell on the upwinds to tack on them and keep them behind. And the thing is when you know you are up against the wall a little bit, you have to fight even harder, and so there will be mistakes. You know, and everyone remembers the obvious mistake of me falling off the boat. And that's just because we're pushing the boat so hard to stay in front of them, and we knew they were catching us, and you just got to get up there a little bit quicker. And, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think that moment of falling off was the difference between winning and losing, but
no one's blaming you for that.
It gives you an indication on how on the limit we were pushing that boat to make it do what it did. And, you know, I think we can be really proud of it. And, you know, what was probably very pleasing more than anything was the fact that Team New Zealand went and wiped Oracle, because it meant that we were, at least in my opinion, the second best boat there. And it's hard to be the second best boat in the Challenger Series because you never even get to race the Defender. But, you know, it meant that all the work that we did in Bermuda in what I call the incremental gains paid off. You know, we were there with Japan and Oracle for the best part of a year and a half trying to leapfrog each other. And we managed to leapfrog at the last moment when it was the most important. But Team New Zealand came in wide and bowled everyone out of the park, and, you know, good on them.
Artemis was such a special team. I mean, everyone just seemed so tight, with the charismatic leader of Ian Percy. You know, how hard was it when it was all over and you all sort of went your separate ways?
It was devastating. It was devastating to leave Bermuda. I think everyone involved in our team, you know, really enjoyed it there. I think we had a great team, whether it was a sailing team, a design team, or our whole shore team, you know, who work harder than probably everyone in the team in terms of hours and physically keeping the boat going. Everyone had a fantastic time. I think the team culture that was established was what was shown as a personality of always, you know, going for broke, you know, going hard, and, you know, we had a lot of fun. You know, the base that we established there was great, you know, in terms of a place to go to work every day. And I think more importantly, the families in the team loved it, you know. All the wives and partners that were there working, supporting those who were working, they had their own family. And I remember Emma and I, we didn't ever want to leave, you know. We thought, you know, we just, you know, want to roll over and keep doing this because, you know, everyone was there. And So much so to the point that our visa expired, I think, on the 1st of October, and we left the day before our visa expired. We extended our house rent. You know, we're still friends with our landlords who are from Bermuda, and that's, you know, it was just a really special couple of years there. And, you know, if anyone said the Cup was going back to Bermuda, you know, and Artemis was going to be involved, I think every single person in the team would want to be there.
What about an Australian team?
That's a great question, Shirley. There would be fantastic to have an Australian team. You know, the fact that New Zealand, of a population of just over 4 million, can put together an America's Cup team time and time again, and a country of Australia, which is well over 25 million, can't do it, you know, is quite disappointing. And, you know, there's no shortage of Aussies involved in the Cup, whether it be sailors or boat builders or designers, but no one's been able to string together a team to really, you know, have a good challenge. And, you know, if that opportunity presented itself, I'm sure all the Australian sailors would come instantly. And I know Tom Slingsby was pushing very hard for it at the end of the last America's Cup, and, you know, he said it was just quite difficult to get, you know, the funds together when there was so much unknown about what was going to happen in New Zealand. The rules and the boat took so long to come out. He said he got so close to getting what was required to get a team together, and then it just lingered for a bit too long. And he said in the end, the cost of this America's Cup probably would scare too many people away. But, you know, I'd like to think sometime in the future there'll be one.
I mean, you've seen firsthand how hard it is to lead a team in the America's Cup. Would you fancy a crack at doing that yourself?
Well, I'm still a bit young for that. I've still got a lot to learn. But, you know, the fact that I'm here at the moment in Sydney, you know, running the Japanese team, you know, as the CEO of the team as well as the skipper is a great learning exercise for me. And, you know, there's a big difference between managing a team and just thinking about performance and driving the boat. You know, that's the fun part. That's the easy part, you know, managing the sailing team and going out there day after day and sailing and getting better. But constructing a team from scratch, finding the right backers and sponsors, and you know, creating a design team and a good working team is a huge challenge, and one I'd love to take on, but maybe not this year.
Well, potentially another Olympics before then. You know, how likely is it that you'll get to Tokyo in 2020?
That's a tough one. I honestly don't know. And you know, the funny thing with the Olympics is it just keeps drawing you back. It keeps drawing me back because it's just pure sailing. And you know, I've really enjoyed this last year, you know, sailing with my sister and learning a new boat. Fortunately, I had some funding that I could roll over from the Rio, and I just said, oh look, I'm probably not going to need that or use that, but you just never know. And so I called up Ian Murray, who was running the team, and said, look, Hayley's talking me into coming and sailing the Nacra. Sounds like a good opportunity. You know, will you support me if I do that? And they did, and we went and got second at the World. So it's a big task for us now, I think, to change just a couple of events and a good result into a solid Olympic campaign to qualify, let alone go and win a medal, particularly when Australia now has two very good Nacra teams. One team who's 100% training nearly every day in the Nacra, and me and Hayley, who are just trying to find a spare day here and there to get some time in the boat. But I'm hoping once this SailGP event is over here in Sydney, we can start to put some hours in the boat before we head off to Europe.
You're still hungry for it?
I love sailing. You know, I love going and competing and showing that I'm good. And my poor wife Em's like, really? We're going to do another double campaign? But I think the difference between an Olympic campaign married with an America's Cup campaign and an Olympic campaign with, say, SailGP is that even though SailGP for me is a full-time job, you know, as a CEO running the team, it's not as physically taxing having to sail every day. You know, there's 5 events and there's limited amount of training, and so, you know, we're embarking on a challenge to try and manage both, and you throw a new little baby into that, and it's going to be another very busy year, and that's how we like it.
Well, best of luck with that. I'm imagining the celebrations. If you stood on the top of the podium with your sister, can you imagine the party in Wangi? It would be huge.
I can imagine that, yeah. And then the thing is, there's endless support for us, which is amazing, but there's also very high expectations. So managing everyone's expectations is always something that I don't really worry about too much, but I'm sure other people often think about what other people think of you. But at the end of the day, to be really good at what you do, you have to shut out everyone else and just sort of focus on your job. And I think, this year coming up, it's going to be a lot of balance. We need to, as you get older in life, you see different perspective and you have balance. And Em and Jack are going to come and travel, and they'll be in San Fran with us and come to a lot of the events, and we hope that works. And if it doesn't, we'll reassess and make plans, but it should be a fun year.
Well, I had great expectations on how you'd perform at the podcast, Nathan. I mean, how's it been? It's a lot longer than the traditional TV interview.
Yeah, well, you told me it was going to be half an hour, and it's probably almost an hour now, so clearly we must be getting close to the end of it.
Nathan, I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck this week here in Sydney. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. No, it was great to have a chat, and it's nice to have a conversation longer than 5 minutes, and have people not wanting just a soundbite for a change, to actually have a bit of a chat. So no, thank you.
What do you think? What a nice guy. I mean, he's not only one of the most progressive sailors of his generation, but Nathan is also one of those sailors that you look forward to having a chat with in the boat park. He's pretty special. Well, we recorded that just before the first SailGP event in Sydney, and Nathan was skippering Team Japan. They finished second to his great mate Tom Slingsby, who was leading the charge on the Aussie boat. And I'm sure that battle, that rivalry will continue right to the very end in the final event in Marseille. So what's next for the podcast? Well, tune in next month and I'll be talking to my old coach, my great friend and Volvo Ocean Race winner Ian Walker. He's got some real fascinating insight into the next Olympic Games in Tokyo. Ian, of course, is now the director of racing. He's responsible for not only delivering medals in the UK, but he's also responsible, I suppose, for building up the sport, for making sure that there is a legacy of sailing here. So a lot to look forward to. It's fascinating, it really is. Please keep in touch. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, I'm dying to know if you think there's somebody you really like to hear from. Let me know, or you think it can be improved in any way. Thanks for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42. This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.